Okay, welcome again, everyone. It's 1 minute after the hour. Thank you all for attending to today's GoToWebinar. The effort here today is to give you an opportunity to learn about what the real estate industry have been doing, and particularly the real estate brokers around the industry and their franchise partners around the industry have been doing to develop a unified database that allows real estate brokers to manage their information more effectively and to be able to connect that information to the applications that they operate in their business. So we have a wonderful group of people here today. Specifically, I'd like to introduce Alex Lang. Alex is the president and CEO of Upstream. He's been on for about 1.5 years in that capacity, and also one of the founding participants of Upstream, which is Dan Elsey. He's the owner and president of Real Estate One and is acting chairman of the board of Upstream, which is, you should know Upstream is a broker-owned company. It's not owned, well, it's just solely owned by brokers, and any broker can buy shares in the company. It is a for-profit company. However, its intent is not to yield profits to the brokers, but rather to deliver a utility that is successful in answering the needs that brokers have. So, Dan, why don't we just kick it off with your perspective to just set the table and explain to people why the brokerage community invested in Upstream and put this all together.
Yeah, sure. So usually, unfortunately, human nature, we tend not to act without some sort of pain or motivation. So in the case of Upstream, the pain and motivation were a lot of different pain points. One was seeing our data as a broker and as real estate practitioners being used across the industry, particularly in the portals, and sort of having our data monetized without much control over that. The other piece was, in many ways, if as significant or more, is that we were inputting data a lot of different ways, a lot of different times, whether it was in the MLS system, then in our accounting system, and then in our CRMs, in our lead management, all the different vendors, whether it's direct mail, advertising, marketing, lead gen, and it just was a lot of work. And with those pain points in mind, and that interest that going forward, our world as practitioners will revolve around data, as it does in so many other businesses. So we looked at whether it's all of our marketing will be a database, all of our lead generation, all of our client follow-up systems, all of that would be a database. So it's a good idea that we work on a process that can control our data. And since it was a common concern amongst all realtors, we thought that a common database, a common system that we all could use would be a good idea. So we spent probably 1.5 years just making sure that there was a real interest. Just wasn't a small group, and it wasn't such a small group. It was most of the major franchises and networks together looking at this, and we thought that there was significant enough interest that it made sense. We created the entity. Alex came on board, and then we hired RPR to create the product, and we've been off and running. And so far we've gotten a lot of progress. We've discovered that it takes longer and costs more. Surprise, surprise, for any software rollout. But it's been we've gotten some good momentum, and it does from a broker standpoint, because we're just coming on board now in the Detroit area. We can see where it is going to save us time. Where many of the MLSs, by the way, from the time we started Upstream until now, have made a lot of progress in solving some of those pain points of multiple input and how they can help us feed data to us to help that. So that's helped. We can still see a lot of instances, particularly working with vendors, how we will save money. The example that I've used before is that we had 2 different brands. We all operated multiple brands in Michigan area. We had 2 different brands and 2 different vendors with the data feeds for those brands and the MLSs. And one of the vendors went away. They just weren't able to support us anymore. So we had to have a second vendor step in and get the data feed and fix it. It took about 3 months to do.
I think Dan is having some trouble with his internet.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, Dan, thank you. I can tell you're experiencing some internet access problems where you're at today, but we sure do appreciate you coming and giving some of this foundation. It's certainly awesome to have the perspective of a brokerage like yours to understand some of the things that we're having done. So with that in mind, as Dan was iterating, the group of brokers that started Upstream set on a path to make sure that it was inclusive for all brokers. They created a board of directors, which is representative of large firms, franchise organizations, medium and small firms, as well as some outside directors to guide and lead the company. They went through a thorough vetting process to determine whether they could buy an application that would satisfy everyone's needs, whether they had to build one from scratch, or whether they could partner with somebody. The National Association of Realtors offered to leverage their development experience that they had gained through RPR to start out on a new project to create Upstream for the brokers. But the relationship there is a vendor relationship, so they custom built Upstream for the brokers. And with that, I want to introduce Alex Lang, who is the president of the company, and Alex is going to show the live production product, and this should help vendors who wish to connect to Upstream understand how they're going to be able to serve their broker clients better. So with that, welcome, Alex.
All right, well, thank you, Victor. Just a couple of administrative items that we skipped over really quick here. I'll just come back to that because I've already gotten some questions about it. We are recording this webinar, so we'll make the recording available. A PDF version of this PowerPoint will also be made available to all attendees as well, just in case you just want a hard copy of the presentation. It will be minus the web demo, of course. And last but not least, there's a questions area in your GoToWebinar tool. Use that to ask questions along the way. Kim, that you see on the screen now, she helps moderate. She's sitting here next to me monitoring just the questions, and as they come in, she'll sort of flag me down, let me know that maybe I need to ask a question, and if it makes sense to do it in context, I'll do it. If your question isn't answered immediately, it's because I know of a different place to potentially answer it. And of course, at the end, there's a Q&A section, and any question we didn't answer, we will go ahead and try to wrap up at that point. All right, so you heard from a broker, one of the founding brokers, on why they wanted to do this, why they felt the need. It really was spawned from just a lot of pain points, a lot of redundant access, redundant entry, sort of little visibility of what's happening after syndication. And they were just realizing that, a broker's signature is the one that's on that listing contract. They are fundamentally the fiduciary and the ones liable if something goes wrong. And so the crux of the project was really just based on, we need to act as fiduciaries. So it means we need to at least do things with intent, know where things are going. It doesn't mean they're going to change the world or change the way they distribute or change who they distribute to. They just want to do it on purpose. And so this tool helps them do that. And so we're going to walk through a little bit about what Upstream is. So we'll give a quick little primer. Most people have followed through most the news and over last year about, some people call it a pivot. It really isn't a pivot. It was more of a deployment strategy. But we have two different ways that brokers and agents can work with Upstream. In some markets, we do direct input. And direct input is where the agent is entering the listing into Upstream first. We'll walk you through a little bit of that. And at that point, the data is distributed to all the different systems, all available systems, including the MLS. So the MLS is actually getting the data from Upstream. We, in those cases, have worked with the MLS. We've interrogated their systems. We've recreated all of their rules and compliance, et cetera, for listing data entry, and we produce it. So we then, when we give it to the MLS, they're getting it exactly the way they, should be getting it. We're doing the error handling up front, the validation up front, and obviously the systems, when they talk to each other, do error validation as well. But that's generally the intent. And so it's the first and single data entry point. We store all the data in the database in RESO format. We deliver it to the end points based on how they want to see it. So we translate as we need to, whether it's for the vendor or for MLS or for a franchise system, et cetera. And then we store all the imagery, all the videos, everything high res. So photos are stored high res. Videos are stored high res. There's unlimited video and photo storage, and documents are left in their native state. So the broker can put all their things in one place, distribute it to different locations from there, and then as the MLS receives it, the MLS will do what they need to do with photos, et cetera. And and the vendors, same thing, they process as they need to. In the direct broker direct feed markets, this is really built for when MLSs aren't quite ready to work with us, and there's a variety of legitimate reasons why, and in cases where we're going to wait until some standards are sort of ratified, and we'll go through that in a little later slide. But in this case, the agent still enters their listing into the MLS. At that point, participating brokers on Upstream, their data is then being received in the Upstream from the MLS, and we're getting it in the best quality that that particular MLS will give it to us, or can give it to us. So in some instances, I might be getting the photo still high res. In some instances, I might be getting the photos back that they've been downsampled and watermarked and have been processed fundamentally. So but we will get the broker data from the MLS, and then the broker and that agent have the ability to manage that listing within Upstream, whether they can enhance it. And enhancement means they could say, I want to manage the photos in Upstream. So the photos that are in MLS still are there, and nothing goes back to the MLS in a broker direct feed format, but they can bring in their high-res photos again and distribute the high-res photos to maybe print vendors, etc. So they have that ability to all or nothing, say, I'm going to manage the things that we manage, the distribution we manage in Upstream, I want to manage the photo, or I want to manage, and it's not all or nothing, it can be on a listing by listing basis. In all cases, once the data is in Upstream and the broker has decided that they want to manage some of the distribution, then the broker has the ability to entitle their staff, entitle agents, etc., to manage that distribution. So in some cases, in a command and control, and that's my words, sort of brokerage scenario, the broker can say, I'm setting up the distribution, we are going to send it to these 5 vendors, and the agent doesn't have a say. In other brokerages, they will give the agent the ability to pick and choose, opt in or opt out on certain brokers. They can even entitle that agent to bring on new vendors themselves. So they have a lot of different configuration capabilities of how much they want to manage and control. In all of this, the number of places that they distribute, it's still their choice. I mean, the whole point of the system is to give the brokers choice. So if they're distributing at 10 places and their MLS sends it to most of them, and they said, you know what, I want to manage these 5, but these other 5, I want the MLS to still manage that. They totally can. I mean, it's their choice, and you'll see that in the interface and how they configure it and which vendors they pick and choose. And then it'll be up to them. If they say, I'm going to manage the distribution of data to Imprev for my just listed postcards, then they can turn around and set that up. And maybe what they'll do is go into their MLS and say, don't syndicate to Imprev. We'll manage that ourselves. Or they'll just negotiate with Imprev and say, I know you might be getting the data from the MLS as well as part of a greater feed, but use the Upstream data first because it has XYZ in it. So that's the capabilities they have. Now, what's really great for vendors is when you get the access to that broker data, just like a title, there are no borders, fewer contracts, and we can give you better data in many instances. So the agreements, and you see in this diagram, there are agreements, but it's not as much as you think. So there's a data access and display agreement that you have as a vendor with that brokerage. These are the agreements you probably already have. If you already have, and I'll just use Imprev again, and if you have an agreement with Imprev to do just listed postcards, you already have a broker to vendor agreement in place that includes things like data access, use, etc. Those are locked, so that's already in place. We don't trump that. In fact, there is no agreement regarding data use between the vendor and Upstream. Between the vendor and Upstream, there's basically just service level agreements. It's us committing to uptime, it's us committing to outage notifications, etc. It's us committing to notification of updates and changes, etc. That's it. So the agreement between the vendor, you, and Upstream is very simple. There's an agreement between Upstream and the MLS, and those agreements are basically surround things like data access and privacy as the MLS is giving us the broker's data, what we can do it, what we show, etc., are all built into those agreements. And of course, there's an agreement between the MLS and the broker saying, I'm okay, I'm authorizing you to give me my data, or the MLS is giving the broker their data. Some MLSs have agreements, some don't even have agreements. They already give the broker their own data, and they don't have agreements in place. So if there's an agreement that's required between the broker and MLS, we set that up. And of course, finally, the broker has an agreement with us. Those are again around privacy, around service level agreements, and of course about like payment terms, etc. That's our business agreement. So that's how the contracts are set up. Now, what's interesting about this is this relationship between the broker and vendor, and let me use a large example and then we'll bring it home. So if a vendor decides to have a contract with Crylike. So Crylike is a very large brokerage on the East Coast that happens to be in like 42 different MLSs. Now, if you usually as a vendor do an agreement with the brokerage, with the firm, and if you do an agreement with Crylike and you require some sort of data, listing data, right now you're probably doing, if you're not getting the data directly from them in like an FTP feed, you are getting the data from the MLS, and now there's a three-way agreement between you, Crylike, and the MLS. It's the way we've been operating forever. Now, if you're in 42 MLSs, guess what? Just to get this deal with Crylike done, you got 42 separate agreements with 42 different MLSs in order to service that one client. So in those cases, this is really tough. So if you think about like small vendors or startups who are trying to get in, who need someone's data, this is really hard. I mean, as you guys have gone through this, going MLS to MLS to MLS to get configured, to get compliant, to get the agreements in place, it is hard for a small startup who's just getting kicked off to actually do that work and get through it. In fact, a lot of them die before they actually get any sort of escape velocity, if you will. So our goal in Upstream was like, well, we want to inspire innovation. I mean, we like what these startups are doing, so let's make it easier for that startup or that small vendor to work directly with the broker and get that broker's data. And of course, as we mentioned before, you have better access to better quality photos, videos, as well as there's additional MLS data, broker data, that may be not stored in the MLS. So a broker might have an agreement with the vendor, says, I'm going to give you drive times, and we have that data, so I'm going to give that to you, and I'm going to append it to that listing. Or, it could be an example of, the MLS doesn't support a pre-active listing status, like coming soon, and maybe the broker wants to support it because they're sending it into print, or they're sending postcards for coming soon. So they want to be able to support that as well. The other thing we have is we manage the broker can manage their office roster. So if they're buying or acquiring new companies and they're not have new addresses and new roster information regarding that firm, we manage that for them. Agent rosters. What's really important to think about teams is employee rosters. So teams will have people managing listings that aren't technically a licensed agent. Maybe it's a listing coordinator, maybe it's a transaction coordinator, right? And so the broker is saying, with my listings, I need to be able to empower them, and I can, because again, the listing is mine, and I want to be able to have them work. So we had to let them manage employee and roster information as well as vendors. So you'll see an example later on where that's really important. If you can imagine as a vendor, perhaps you have an agreement with your client where every single time a new person comes on board, we hire a new agent, I want you to provision a new version of your software for that agent, or spawn off, an account for them. More importantly, and this is where it's really ugly in the community, broker community as a general rule, is we're not very good at discontinuing accounts or turning things off when an agent leaves us. And so we have these random accounts out there of agents who now have still access to a tool that I'm paying for that is no longer with my firm. So we want to be able to give the vendors the ability, they can connect with the Upstream API, and then see office information, employee information, roster information, who's come, who's gone, who's new, etc. And then do things that whatever the agreement is between you and the broker, to take action on those events. As I said before, the broker can create roles. They can decide who has the ability to add a listing, who has the ability to update photos, who has the ability to distribute to different vendors, even to the ability of adding new vendors. We've even given the ability to create roles like a photographer role, so that brokerage can have a photographer enter the system, and that photographer has very limited access and very limited screens, but perhaps they are there to upload all the photos they just took for the broker for a particular listing. So we even allow them to create those types of roles. I'm gonna take a break for a second because I see that we have questions coming in. Kim, do we have any that I should be answering right away?
Tons of questions coming in.
Good.
Does Upstream provide feeds for consumption for brokers or listing sites?
Okay, so the question is, does Upstream provide listings, feeds for consumption for broker or listing sites? I'm gonna actually capture that question because there's a great screen that I'm gonna show and what works, what types of products work best with Upstream and which ones are not ideal for Upstream. And I think that will answer the question, and we'll go from there.
I think the one question that did come in, Alex, that you may want to address is that
Sure.
there was a question related to what is the difference between Upstream data and IDX or VOW data?
Mm-hmm. So the difference between, well, I mean, IDX and VOW, I'm assuming I'm not going to really get into like describing the difference between IDX and VOW itself, but Upstream data, especially like the broker direct feed, where I'm getting the data from the MLS, it's virtually the same, right? Now, again, the broker can enhance it. So in some cases, an IDX feed, I might only get, I'm going to get the photos, they're going to be processed, they're going to be watermarked with that MLS, logo, etc. And there are limits on how many videos.
Okay, so I think the question is more like,
Yeah.
Maybe I can just answer the question for this
Sure.
individual. So when you get a data feed from an MLS, you get a data feed that follows a group of rules that the brokers in that market have agreed to, and you're getting all the data from an MLS market or a region. When you connect to Upstream, you're being authorized for the broker to access only their data, not the data of any other broker. So if you had 25 brokers that had their data in Upstream that were your clients, all 25 would authorize them. The beautiful part is you would have one data feed for all 25 customers.
Yep, so here, that's a good segue into this next slide. So does Upstream play well with everybody? And the short answer is no. So again, Upstream is a platform very similar to Google Drive. We enable the broker. Upstream technically does not entitle or give data to anyone. It's the broker who does that. Now the broker only has access and only has privileges to entitle vendors or agents or whatever for their particular listings. So a vendor that needs access to broker data or transaction level data, you can think of like a marketing firm who does print, or a transaction room, or like a DocuSign or .loop. They're ideal because it's sort of that broker, that instance, that transaction. Now, if you're a vendor that needs all the data in a market, property search, analytics, perhaps some CMAs, it's not ideal because you can't really, it doesn't really work that way. And here's, I'll give you an example. I'll go through these pictures. So in figure A, so you as the vendor, you have these agreements and you can get it, you get the broker's data and only the broker's data. Now, the advantage with Upstream over the traditional feeds is, again, think about my Crylike example earlier, where if I'm working with this one broker, but he's in 45 or 42 MLSs, now I'm getting feeds from 42 MLSs, where in this case, I'm getting all of their data across regions. There's no boundaries. Now, the reason why it wouldn't work well for search is if a broker can only entitle access to their data, in order to even emulate something like IDX, every single broker would have to individually create a partnership with every other broker, and you'd have to create this giant like matrix of connections in order to even reproduce it. Now, there's a million reasons why we did that structurally, because we had put in our operating agreement, we will never try to be an MLS or compete with an MLS. It was never the intent. The MLSs do great work, and for those instances where you need market level data, you should be getting an IDX feed, no doubt. But if you are working with a vendor, a broker, and you're a vendor that like does print marketing, luxury print, or you're doing like postcards, that broker right now is most of the time, in lots of instances, going into that vendor, re-uploading a high-res photo for print, and that we're trying to get rid of that inefficiency. So let's go ahead and have that connection with that vendor. All the high-res photos are available. They'll get them as they need them. Now, there is a use case we've seen a couple times where even a company that needs generally like property search, where they need broad market data, they're also integrating with Upstream as well. And a good example might be, I mean, what I've seen is I've seen some website providers use their IDX feed to do the property search. So your search result page has your typical, you know, all the compliance issues and all the, you know, data you need, and you're designing the exact same. But when they go to property details, this is very common with a company built website, right? So I'm a Coldwell Banker Bain, and I have my own websites at Coldwell Banker Bain. I want my properties to be showcased. So when you go to maybe a listing of one of my listings, or if I have my single property website pages, my featured listings on my page, I want to use the Upstream data because I want the extra data that I have. I want the photos. I want all of that. And since they're single property websites or they're premier properties on their website, they have their own unique URLs. So they don't fall really into the gambit of your IDX rules. They're using IDX for search, but also on their website, they're using the Upstream in order to have the better videos, the better photos, etc. So those are some of the use cases where we see they're using both, but they're not using Upstream for like search results because it wouldn't make sense. Because again, every single broker, one, would have to be on a platform, and then every single broker would have to create this giant web just to be able to even emulate it. So hopefully it answers the question. It's a little complex, but again, the goal is for you, it's the vendors who need to work directly with the broker data. That is the ideal use case. All right, so I'm going to take a minute or two and walk through the live system to give you, so to help you understand how the brokers will work with it, how the agents will work with it, and how you as a vendor can now consume this data. So go right over to. So in this case, I'm logged in to Upstream as a broker staff. And here I am, I'm in the sandbox here. So we're in a test area so I don't break anything in production. But I wanted to show you, so you log in, you end up in the broker will have this dashboard. It will show all the listings in progress. They can obviously change the status of filtering of what they're seeing on their screen. What's really important here is on this dashboard, they can see any notifications. In this case, this listing is going to expire in a day. They can also see who has been set up for distribution for that listing. They can see last time it was distributed. If there are issues, they'll get those as well. And so they get a nice clean way of seeing, here's where all my data is going. And here is the last time that vendor got this piece of data. And here's the last time, and here's any issues that we need to get reported and get notified. Within the listing itself, and this is an instance of direct, so it's our DI market. So this is where the agent actually enters the listing into Upstream first. And I'll show you the broker direct feed in a second. So in this case, when they logged in, if this is a new listing, they just create a new one, but they have the ability to, you know, change the map coordinates by just dragging things around and saving them. And of course, you know, they're going through basic facts, everything you would think about for entering a listing. What you see is a side-by-side of what we have of the public record data. So as the agent is entering data and maybe they're missing a piece of information, they can look over and say, oh, you're built and put it in, or updated, etc. Right? And so everything's logically put through, everything from different features, different tags, etc. They can enter green features, they can store documents, manage the photos, all the above, and they can put in the high res, they can add stuff, they can actually add credits, they can add captions, they can add very large versions of the copy, the captions that they want. And of course, for an MLS who has a limitation on what the captions can be, we'll give them two versions to say, here's the short version, and here's the long version that might go into my print documentation. So the seller photo, you have the opt out, they can add their virtual tours, branded or unbranded. We are appending this, and we're actually creating the version. Just go ahead and upload as many as you want. And then you indicate which ones you want to go to different vendors and targets, including MLSs. They can upload as many photos as they want, all high res. And then they do the sorting and this drag and drop interface. So it's fundamentally how the agent and broker enter the listing in direct input. And in these markets, if I'm in RMLS Portland or I'm in MLS listings in California, we are adhering to all of that MLS's compliance rules.
Alex, if I could just add here, first of all, I think that you guys have done a really good job creating a really nice listing input page. It's certainly at or above a lot of the input pages that we see in many of the MLSs today. But one of the unique things about Upstream that had to be developed into the system is that if a listing was going to go into 3 or 4 MLSs, those MLSs may have specific fields or specific statuses that are very unique to the market. And the nice thing about Upstream is that on this single listing page, if there are those additional fields that only pertain to one of those markets, the agent will be able to, or the agent or the admin will be able to administrate it right from this page. So you can manage multiple market requirements and multiple technology application requirements right from this page. So if there's a particular data field that a technology solution needs, like a transaction manager needs maybe a field for the whoever is processing the escrow, that can be introduced into this field. It'll only appear for your brokerage. That information will be captured here and will be made available into the product application. So for vendors that are on the call that have very specific fields that are being entered again and again and again, or that might be different from market to market, please be aware that if you provide that information to Upstream, it'll be programmed right into this listing management field.
Great, thank you. So the one point before I show the rest of the distribution and setup and how that impacts vendors, what's important here is, again, if the broker has said, agent, you are allowed to opt in or opt out of certain distributions, they can do it all the way down to the listing level. So they can do it for all their listings, they can do it for one listing, and they can pick. So in this case, you're seeing on this listing, this is the MLS it's going to go to. These are the locations that this broker has said, this is mandated, you don't have a choice to opt in or opt out. And here's a vendor where that agent, if they wanted to, can opt out. And I'll show you in the setup where the broker can say it's mandatory, or agent can opt in, or which means it's defaulted opted out, or agent can opt out, which means it's defaulted opted in. And then they have the ability, again, to do this at a listing by listing level. So I'm going to bring up another location here really quick. And I put them in different browsers so I knew which area and location I'm in. So now we're in Arizona. This is a broker direct feed market. In this case, what I wanted to show, again, interface looks very similar. The agent still sees where all the distributions are going. They will still have the ability to edit the distribution. They can manage documents, they can manage photos. So here's in this case where we're in a broker direct feed market. We're getting the data from the MLS, including the photos. The agent at this moment can then say, I want to put my high res, and I want, and for where we're distributing from Upstream, I want to put the high res photos, or I want to put something else in. So they have a choice where they say, you're either going to manage it and have that use the MLS listings as they are, or I'm going to pick Upstream. When you pick Upstream, they get a choice and says, do you want to copy all the MLS listings photos over, and then you can be able to add more listings, or I want to start from scratch because I want to upload all the high res. Again, this data does not go back to the MLS. Everywhere an MLS is distributing, whether it's through a syndication or through IDX, they're getting exactly the same data as they always have, right? Now, if this agent or brokerage has made a partnership with another vendor, and the vendor is getting data from Upstream, in this case, they have the ability to push higher res photos, more videos, etc. So that's the use case where when we say enhance a listing, they can enhance from a photo and video standpoint. And again, as Victor alluded to earlier, that the brokerage has the ability to extend their schema for certain cases. And so again, if we're going to need to add a name or field or timestamp of someone who's managing the escrow, then we'll give them that field, and whatever vendor that they're working with to get that information, maybe it's a transaction room, that data will be sent over as well. So let's look at some distribution. And so when we talk about Upstream and for the broker, we've always said this from a sort of the marketing standpoint, is the broker, as the fiduciary, should have the ability to manage who gets their data. So in this case, they're individually entitling vendors, versus I'm sending it to a syndication source. That syndication source might be sending it to 300 locations, and I don't know which 300 they are, or maybe I do. But they want to be able to, again, take that fiduciary control, so they say who it is. They can say what they're getting. So in this case, if on typical feeds, let's use that just listed postcard vendor as an example. They're getting a massive amount of data when they need 6 fields and 3 high-res photos. Right? It's a postcard. It's a just listed postcard. What they don't, but instead they're getting like every field, right? Because it's one big feed. For in Upstream, when you access this, we configure the vendor and their each individual product. So even if Improv has single property websites and I have an agreement with them to do also my just listed postcards, they will get, they have the ability to get 2 separate feeds or 2 separate pools. And the single property website would clearly have basically all the fields or the majority of the fields. And the just listed postcard might only be getting 6. So we individually configure, and this is the difference for most vendors. A lot of vendors, especially in that just listed postcard case, they're getting this data, they're storing it locally. They're basically getting rid of 80% of it because they're not using it, and they're just using the fields that they are. And this is where the broker's like, well, wait a minute. I'm assuming that everybody is a good citizen and a good player, but I guarantee there might be cases where that vendor who's getting our feed, who's getting all this data and only using 6 fields, might be repurposing that data. Maybe not, but I think that's one of the things is that we just want to really be clear and do things on purpose. And so if a vendor only needs 6 fields, we're going to configure and give them the exact fields that they need.
So all the vendors on the call will provide Upstream with the record layouts that they have for their listings and for the agents and for the offices and for the firm. And then Upstream will provision a feed specific to their requirements. Is that right?
Yep. So in this case, as we set it up, and so when we onboard a vendor, we work with you. You will work with what data you need to get. We actually then turn around and the broker can configure like how much data you're getting. Are you getting off-market listings? What statuses are you getting? What property classes are you getting? So you're not just getting everything. If you don't need to see commercial or lots of land, then why are you getting commercial and lots of land? Right. So this is sort of the early configuration that they have, and the broker can constantly like update this as they need to. And then when you go into the actual field record layouts, this is being set up specifically to you. So you as a company and you as a product are then configured, and then we let them know what they get. So we set this up for them. The broker doesn't have the ability to turn off or on once it's set up. What the broker can do, and our promise to the broker is, you should be able to say which fields that they get. So we can work with the vendors and configure it exactly as you need it. Now, if the broker who we give a visibility into what's being sent says, why are we sending, this field that has, I don't know, this agent's personal information? I don't want to send that. They tell us, then we call you and say, well, okay, can we make a custom version for Coldwell Banker Bain, who doesn't want their phone number, and what does it break or not break? We will not let them arbitrarily take it off or add on, because you don't see it coming and you don't know that it could break something, right? So we give them we give the broker visibility on every field that's going, and we give them the option to contact us and say, hey, I want to modify it. And then we work directly with you to make the modification if it makes sense. If you say there's no way that's a key field and it's going to break, we'll actually go back to the broker and say, no can do, because it's going to actually break. It's a primary key, right? So we will do that, and we'll actually work with that negotiation on your behalf. And again, if it is, if you can't do it, then we'll work with the broker and make sure it happens, and make sure that they understand what would go wrong, and talk them in a different direction if we need to. So I wanted to make sure everybody saw that, you know, in any configuration, we will lock it down and we'll send it, and we'll tell you as the, you know, the vendor, like, you tell us the 17 fields you need. We actually configure exactly that. So there's the difference for a lot of for vendors getting data, is you will get exactly what you need, but we're not going to send you more than you need. So in that case, again, they can set up various distributions. They can pick who they're sending it to, who's configuring. They can then, as a broker, go and decide what the agent can do, what they can't do. I'm gonna go to this admin screen here. And when they look at the different products that have been configured, the broker can then, this is where they say, where I said the agent has the ability to opt in or opt out, or it's required. The broker then determines whether or not whether photos need to go or not. It's a transaction room, doesn't need photos or whatever. They can tell restrictions. Again, this is all the stuff that they can configure on the fly. And they do it by vendor for every single distribution, if that makes sense. And of course, they can, with this, they can see from that vendor where it's got for every single update and send. There's a log. We keep everything. Who makes edits, who makes changes, who's received, how many times they're received, every single time they're received. All those audit trails are provided to the broker for access. All right, Kim, before we move back, anything I should answer right this very second, or while I have the screen up?
How about this? What is the latency on listing data from time of entry?
So in direct input, there is no latency. As soon as they hit save and it's in a status in which you're supposed to receive it, you can get access to it pretty much instantly. So if it has to be an active, clearly you have to wait for it as active. If it's a, you know, you're printing listing presentation material on a pre-listing, then the minute the agent puts it in and you're configured, like I showed in the configuration, that to receive these pre-listings statuses, you can get it instantaneously. In a broker direct feed, we're limited to how, so they put it in the MLS. We have an agreement with MLS. We're pulling, and generally I'd say it's like 15 minutes. It's like the pulling, and every MLS is a little different, but we try to get it as fast as they'll let us get the data, and most of them are 15 minutes. A lot of them, there are ones that are sub that, but we'll continually pull that data into Upstream, and then at that point for distribution, it's as available as, you know, you as a vendor can pull every couple minutes if you want, and if there's a change, and just pick up all changes as you need. So as soon as the data comes in, they'll get it. If the agent updates the photos, you'll get that as soon as you hit save, and the next time you pool. So if you're going to pool every 5 minutes, go ahead and pool every 5 minutes. The latency in the broker direct feed is really going to be how fast then can we get it as a back office feed from the MLS. And like I said, there are MLSs that let us pull continuously. There are ones that say 15 minutes. And you know, it just really depends on what MLS we're getting the data from. Answer that question? All right. So Victor, you've been through the product many times. Do you think there's anything particularly you want me to show before I go back to the deck?
The latency on the BDF, did you say if that's any different than on DI?
No, well, only because we're waiting for the listing from the very first time to get it from the MLS. Right. So we pull from the MLSs who give us access. Right. And particular MLSs, MLS 1 may say you can call it every 5 minutes and get the updates. MLS 2 might say, hey, you can get it every 15. Right. And so the latency is going to be there, but that latency isn't any greater than the latency that you already have if you're getting the data from an MLS. It's going to be the same rules. We kind of fall under the exact same rules as if the vendor's pulling it directly themselves.
Awesome. Well, let's look at roster and teams and offices and orgs.
All right, you get all excited about that. So again, everybody's a member on the system. The members can be configured in a variety of ways. Again, as an agent or as a staff member, they can go in. I'm gonna just make up a letter. Hopefully there's an S person in there. Probably should give them a full name, makes it faster. All right, so here's a person, this is a team, and we can pull up Steve and Julie, continue. We maintain all of their information. We're also allowing them to maintain their profile. So think about an agent and their profile. You know, I'm a luxury agent that serves the greater Greenbrook area community, all that kind of good stuff. How many places do you think that agent has to continually update? How many sites? You know, whether it's their intranet or a portal or other sites, they are constantly having to go in. I go, oh, update my headshot, update my bio, or whatever. What we're doing at Upstream is giving them the ability to put all this in one place and have these, and give the vendors the ability just to pull it. So they change one headshot, it goes across. They change one description, it goes across. And so we're doing that for the member all the way through, their logos, their updates, etc. And we're adding all kinds of fun stuff about, you know, what members they belong to, what teams they belong to, what MLSs they belong to, etc. And we keep all of it in it. If they're part of a team, what office, etc. We're adding, you know, additional things. There are agents who are on literally different. So I'm an agent, Alex Lang, but Alex Lang works for Coldwell Banker Bain in Seattle. But you know what? I work in California in the winter because I'm a snowbird. And so we're helping them create instances where we show them as one human being, not two different people in two different places. So we're working on that right now because we're coming across those instances. Most people don't think about it, but there we have it. So this is a good example where we put the individual agent member information.
Alex, can I just contribute one thing? One of the awesome things that we have that Upstream did that we're really excited about is the whole notion of an agent logo. For any of you that were at the Inman News Conference, you saw that like Compass is really starting to create logos for agents to help them develop their brand. And so that's in there. Obviously, you know, you have team logos and team images that are in addition to the headshot, which is really nice. And then for agents or teams that are members, as you said, of more than one MLS or more than one association, you know how important those association and MLS IDs are to the technology products that you provide. So if you want to query an agent's listings and the agent's in two MLSs, you'll have the broker ID, office ID, and agent ID for each of those MLSs in the data feed from Upstream, so you can construct your queries for those purposes, as an example.
Yep, so here's an example of the brokerage. So Coldwell Banker Bain, this is a real customer, even though we're in test data. Here's an example where they set up the contact, all the MLSs that they are in. It will go through and they can put all the different offices and the office locations, because again, you can put members in offices, members in teams, teams in offices, you know, as part of your brokerage, that office could be assigned to multiple MLSs or single MLS. And so that's when you configure all of this exactly to do that.
Yeah, can you open up an office? Because like offices can have images and bios. I know that a lot of technology companies are always struggling to be able to fill out that office page with information that makes it more interesting than just their address and their phone number. So you can have an office page, you can have photographs of the office, offices can have bios. You can indicate who the office manager is in that office, which again is data that's often input manually into different systems. It's just really an excellent job.
So in his case, you know, that office, what the MLS is attached to, if they're teams, the members in that office as a sample. We even show some of the history of the documents and pieces being changed. So that history will always be available to look at each one. We know who updated, etc. So if a regional manager wants to look to see who updated that document in office number 16, he can see who did it. So we are 10 minutes close to the end here. So Victor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the deck, and when we go to Q&A, if we need to bounce back and forth into the application, we will. Awesome. Just as an interest of time.
So I'll ask you the questions, Alex. Does Upstream provide feeds for consumptions for brokers or listing sites? I think you already answered that. It's Upstream allows the broker to send listings.
So Victor, let's do this. Let me finish these last two slides, or 3 slides.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
All right, so here's the thing for vendors. So we have two different ways to integrate. You have our web API, and then we have an outbound RETS server. The RETS server version is 1.9. So if you're a vendor who already gets data through RETS, you can go ahead and just attach to it. It should be pretty easy for you to do. If you want to get it as an API, then our web API is available to you. Both offer the same data: listing, office, agent, media rooms, open houses, all those kind of resources are available. Obviously, the API gives you live interactive access. You can, it's all done in OData, so you can structure queries as you need. And we have a pretty robust API that allows you to do that. Obviously, RETS works exactly the way it works. You know, you got a file to download, you take the data locally, you transform it as you need to, you use it as you need to. So it's whichever one works best for you. You may be getting RETS today because that's what you've been getting, but this is a good opportunity if you think, oh, real-time access might be better for our use cases and we don't have to process it. This might be a good time to even test it out and work on it, to work on getting API access to the data. Now, the Upstream Web API is our API. The reason why it's not a RESO Web API is the RESO Web API at the time when we developed this was read-only. And we needed, you know, the whole CRUD, you know, create, read, update, and delete concept in place. So we've actually been working with RESO, and we've actually provided, even subsidized some resources to help them accelerate the advancement of the RESO Web API so that it can support CRUD. And then we'll migrate to that. We'll support our API and the RESO Web API until it doesn't make sense to. And then our goal is to convert completely over. In fact, all new vendors, you know, once the RESO Web API has been sort of ratified and adopted by the MLS community, we will move everybody to that, and that's where we'll be. But until then, and because especially in those direct input markets, I need to be able to update the records, add new records, etc. We just had to build our own version of it. But it is available. You can access it today. It just depends on what works best for you. So let's talk about what's the catch. Really, I don't know if there is one. I mean, there is a little bit. It has to do with deployment and rollout. So remember, think about how you work with your customers. You work with your brokers. If you're working with a broker that's in Northwest MLS, and that's a really big, you know, it's like the whole state of Washington practically, and they're only in Northwest MLS, and we've got the configuration, and we got, you know, broker direct feed working, then by all means, you should be working with them and grabbing the data today. Now, if we're talking about that, how you know, the HANAs or the Krylak example, the 45 MLSs, it might not make sense to work with them exactly right now, because what if we're only in 20 of those 45 MLSs? So that's the thing we work with, and we work with you as a vendor to understand it and deploy accordingly. But we roll out at a pace of 5 to 6 per month MLSs. We have commitments from MLSs that cover well over 500,000 agents. We continue to contract with the largest MLSs, and that's the thing. And people are like, oh my gosh, there's 700 MLSs. Yeah, but 60 of them cover well over 1 million agents. And then there's just a really long tail. So what we've done is we've gone after them and contract with the largest, and we're continuing to do that and growing our footprint. And then we're kind of opportunistic. So if I have a client, Peter Hunt, who happens to be in RE, Colorado, and I'm doing integration, but he's also in the 3 little neighboring MLSs. If it makes sense, we're going to go after the 3 neighboring. It's just, we're trying to service the broker. And so we will roll out in an opportunistic way. We have commitments from brokerages that cover over 250,000 agents and growing, and we're just going after it. We don't charge vendors, so that's the good news. So vendors, there is no charge. So unlike getting data, so at saturation and big market penetration, you're not paying Upstream to get access to the data at all. Again, the relationship is between you and the broker. Access to Upstream is free. I'd say your cost is fundamentally the integration. If you already do RETS integration, you can just plug in and grab it from RETS, and I'm not sure that's going to take a lot of work. You might have to have your programmers dedupe things if that makes sense, but it's pretty low impact for vendors. We had, even in using our API, we've got vendors that are, I joking around aside, I said, this is like 2 guys and a dog in a garage. They're tiny, but they've integrated in like 2 days. So it's not hard to integrate with us. So our goal is just to get as many vendors as we can. And so today, as of right this very second, we're opening up this integration to Upstream to everybody. What we've done in the past is, as we get a client, or in our pilot, just our pilot markets, if Coldwell Banker Bain is a customer, we only integrate the vendors that were Coldwell Banker Bain. So we're working from the broker out. As of today, we're flipping it on its head and saying, let's open it up all the way. So what I would hope that you would do is sign up today. But here, let me give you a little bit of an incentive. So as vendors come on, and there are thousands of you, we'll categorize them in a directory for the broker, because it's a little hard for them, like which ones are website vendors, which ones are marketing, which ones are print, which ones are CRM. So we will group them. There could literally be hundreds of categories. We're going to try to probably keep it to about 25 and make it manageable, but that doesn't mean it won't grow. We'll just say we'll start there and see what happens. Then what we're going to do is, as you can see in this display, we'll give a premium sort of display for the very first person who in that category who integrates with us, whether you have a client today or not. Everybody else in that category will probably be just listed. What we're training brokers is saying, hey, Coldwell Banker, when you want to pick up a new print vendor, look to see who's integrated first, because it just makes it easy. If they're already working with us and they already have vendors going and getting their data for Upstream, if they pick another vendor who's not on it, we have to go through the entire process of getting vendor integration. Versus, hey, here's a roster of everybody who's already integrated, pick one. So it behooves the vendor community to get on and get listed. And like I said, I wanted to make it easy, so let's give everybody a little bit of an incentive. So in those categories, if you're first on, we'll give you more of a premium looking version. These are things that other people would charge you for. I'm not doing that. I want you on, get you one for free. Right? The other thing is we send out a lot of emails. So imagine you have 250,000 agents on the platform and are signed up. I'm emailing a lot of people about updates. I'm going to feature you in some logical, clean fashion, rotate you into emails so that you get seen as well. And then, of course, when the broker goes in and he's looking for vendor selections, you'll be there. You'll be on that list. So this is how we're looking at it. Again, this is a broker-paid product. The brokers pay for it. The vendors do not. So come one, come all. It doesn't make any sense not, if you've got any bandwidth at all, to integrate today. So with that, here you go. It's a little bit in the URL. It's just Upstream Partner. If you click there, you'll go to a sign-up page. All you got to do is sign up, and we will then turn around. We will contact you shortly. We'll have to wait till see how as all of them come in. And then I will have the implementation team contact you, get you credentials, and get you access to the API documents. From there, it's all you. But we'll work with you. We'll help you. We have a team in standby. If you have issues with access or credentials aren't working, that helped us. We'll be ready to go. And like I said, we want to build that base and get those brokers on, and we want to get as many vendors on and give brokers choice. Again, the whole concept is give the brokers choice. So with that, why don't we open it up? Victor, why don't you hit me some questions, and we'll take it as long as you let us.
Awesome. Yeah, there are a lot of questions. So, and you know what, Alex, if it's all right with you, I think we should just let the recording keep rolling. And then for people who have to leave because it is the top of the hour, who want to come back and listen to these questions later, just we'll send you the recording and you can zoom forward to this area of our webinar today and benefit from the answers to the questions, because there are some good ones in here. So first question, is the data input customized to the broker's needs to include not just what the MLS needs, but also other fields the brokerage wants for their internal systems and their third-party vendor needs?
The answer is yes. We configure the screen. The screen that you saw for direct input actually is sort of a chameleon. It's not only configures for the MLS data, it added not only for broker additional data, but it actually, since we know what the brokers can figure out which vendors are in there, it actually adapts to configure for the vendor requirements as well.
So we've only seen Upstream in English, so I guess it would work to any broker in the world that uses English. Is there any limitation to brokers who are international using it? Maybe a firm that operates in both Canada and the United States, for example?
So right now, the intent is to roll out US first, of course, Canada second. There isn't a technical issue, UTF-8 on the database or like that for us to actually have this thing translated and work in kanji or something like that. But there's not a technical limitation. It's just more of a what's a realistic deployment. We have actually talked to other large organizations. In fact, we actually talked to representatives from Brazil about using this as a platform. It really depends on, I would assume that in what we would consider like MLS universes, that like where they don't have an MLS, or like Mexico or whatever, we just create an infrastructure that looks like an MLS. We'll probably mirror, something that looks like the RESO data dictionary as a root database. Probably have to add and modify it for that country's locality specifics, but it's very doable. It's just, I've got a lot of people to get on the platform first.
Yeah, well, and I do know that a lot of the founding brokers that are part of Upstream and who've already committed to Upstream are members of international networks. So,
Absolutely.
they're already, through Leading RE or through Sotheby's or through Christie's or, Keller Williams, all the franchises. So, there's certainly some international component to it. So it's not a limitation by Upstream, but not what we're trying to do today. What happens to photos after they are sold?
So it depends on, again, broker direct feed or direct input, and whether when the agent uploads their own version of the photos, then they are asked, there's an agreement form that pops up, and they have to basically say that they have the rights to those listings. And this is part of trying to adhere and work with some of the compliance things and what NAR is pushing as far as new agreements to say, hey, broker, use this version of an agreement that says you have the rights to these photos. If not, they have to check it, and then it'd be gone. If the broker has the rights, they can keep those photos forever, for indefinitely. Now, if they don't, then they disappear. In the broker direct feed market, where the MLS says they go. I mean, they're not going to stay.
And also remember that when your feed is created for the vendor, you have an option to indicate whether, what status is. So in the event that a property is sold, that vendor's either going to receive the sold records or not, and that can be managed accordingly. Okay, so if a broker is using Upstream to syndicate to their vendors, does the vendor still need to license data from each MLS?
It depends. Like I said, if every one of your partners, every one of your brokers are on the platform, and you're getting the data from Upstream instead, the answer in short is probably no. Obviously, if you need market data, the answer is yes. But if you have 15 clients or 1,500 clients, and half of them are Upstream and half of them aren't, you still have to get the ones that aren't from your own.
Right. I think most of the enterprise level brokerages have gone to providing data feeds to their syndication partners directly.
Yes.
That it's really the small and mid-sized broker that hasn't had the database capabilities or didn't want to pay some of the heavy fees to their vendors for constructing those data feeds to the third-party syndication site. So yeah, it doesn't matter what. And in fact, that's a funny point. We were talking about this to a brokerage in Buffalo, New York, and he's like, "Oh, wait a second! I get all this technology for how much? Like this, the database capabilities that a broker gets from Upstream are incredible for small brokers as much as they are to solve the needs of large brokers."
Yeah, and to just riff on that point for a second, I mean, that was one of our goals, right? Because you're right, the largest brokers were already building these kind of tools, and we're already sort of managing the data this way themselves. My conversation with Dan Elsey, who was at the top of the call, was like, "Why are you being an IT shop? You're a mortgage, real estate, title company. Why are you doing this?" And they're like, "Yeah, we wouldn't do it anymore. We would just use this instead." And the large franchises, the Realogies and the Berkshire Hathaways, they've been building tools like this for a long time. But the question is like, what about the indie broker? They didn't have a chance because they don't have, you got 5 people in your organization. You don't have an IT team. And so
well, before you were around, Alex, I can tell you we did try because Remax, Berkshire Hathaway, Keller Williams, Realogy, all of them have some type of version that's just like Upstream. The problem is they all built them differently.
Right.
And they're all investing millions of dollars of treasury into building something differently. And you know from your experience launching Market Leader into Keller Williams that that implementation is a bear.
Right.
If Upstream would have been available at that time, you would have been able to light up every Keller Williams account with Market Leader in a day.
Yep, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's excellent. There's a question here about license fees, and to be clear, there are no license fees charged to vendors from Upstream.
Correct.
There's a comment that says this is great as a photographer. The ability to load it into Upstream directly is fantastic. Makes it easier for agents and brokers to get the data on their listings and get those the photographs on the internet faster. Would you consider the feed better or more accurate than ListHub or the MLS? I mean, if it's an API, I'm not going to ask you to answer this, Alex, but ListHub sometimes has RETS, and if you're pulling via RETS and you may only be getting your updates 4 times a day through ListHub, I think they have different SLAs for different people. So I don't know what your ListHub feed agreement is, but with Upstream, if you pull it via the API, you'd be getting live data as it happens.
Yep.
Will the vendor get all data statuses?
The other piece, hold on, Victor. The other piece of that is, again, if the broker has enhanced that listing or the agent has enhanced that listing, nobody else is going to get that.
Right. So for the most part, the MLS feeds have specific structure to them, and not that it's really confining, but if you're a portal that there was an effort, I think it was by Realtor.com about 3 years ago, where they had actually built agreements with all of the hotels where you get channel 2 and it tells you what's happening in the market, and they were going to put a real estate channel there, but all of the quality of the photos that Realtor.com was getting from their MLSs was too low to be able to transport onto those high-res television screens. Like we could do that today very easily. So there's no limitation.
And think about vendors who are doing like they're analyzing the photos for things that are in objects in the photos. I mean, the higher resolution, the better, obviously.
Yeah. And I don't want to slam
here's an example. Let me give you a real life use case for a real life customer in a real live MLS. The MLS is actually pretty awesome. They give the data back to the broker pretty much intact. The photos are still high res, but they're watermarked in the bottom. This brokerage then goes in and they manually crop the bottom of the photo out to get rid of the watermark before they send it to print. And that's a use case that's happening today.
Okay. So all that goes away. Thank you. That poor broker. We could write an app for that. Will the vendor receive all the data, all statuses, all property types? It's whatever the broker authorized. Remember, the broker's in charge. They give you any of the data you want, any statuses, any fields, whatever.
And number of years, etc. Yeah.
Photo quality we talked about. I just would note, there's a really practical reason why MLSs truncate the photo sizes. If you have enormous photos and you're running a search application like the MLS system itself, and you haven't made the photos smaller, it'll take forever to deliver those search results.
Yep.
And obviously on mobile, you want to optimize. So, there's a lot of good reasons for why MLSs make the good choices that they make with photos. But brokerages have additional needs that mandate them to store photos in high res.
Well, and some of the stuff is legacy too. It's back in the day, it was really, really expensive to store that much data. Our platform is we're all cloud centric, and it's gotten ridiculously cheap to store and spin up cloud centric server storage and servers.
So the next question, I would just I don't know. I think it's more of an observation, and it's an accurate one. Upstream is not an IDX data feed. It is just the broker's data only. If you need IDX, you still go through the MLS to get IDX data. However, you also want to connect with Upstream because you're going to get office rosters, agent rosters, staff rosters, enhanced listings, coming soon listings, a tremendous amount of information that will allow your application to be better, especially when you think about onboarding agents. So, you know, a large enterprise level brokerage like Dan Elsey may be adding, you know, 10 agents a week and maybe offloading 3 if he's having a good week. But it's, you know, these people are coming and going all the time. And what happens with so many technology vendors is that their application isn't getting into the hands of the agents because they're not able to get these profiles set up quickly enough. For one broker we talked to last week in Northern California, it was taking 7 days for their agents to get access to all 38 of the applications that they provide to their agents. They were doing much better in Southern California, where it was only taking 2.5 to 3 days. But nevertheless, with Upstream, that'll be instant. They add an agent, it automatically notifies the vendor that this new agent exists. It provides the vendor system with all of the information it needs to provision the account, and the account is provisioned.
Let's keep going to the questions. There's a lot of them. So.
Yeah, where can I find data specs for platform upfeed? Again, that the URL that you want to go to is bit.ly, bit.ly/upstream partner. And nearly 100% of our large firms have integrated with their data. We see various setups where they're either hub, or we take the data from them and send it out for them. Or are we master and hub, and we send data out and we're the entry point for the company roster data? Will Upstream support being the master and being the endpoint from another provider? It's a really difficult question to unpack. What we'll do is have, I'll send this question to you, Alex, and we will answer it.
I'll do a blog post on it.
Yeah, okay. Can we use our agent roster and send promotional email and not be in violation of the Spam Act?
Can you use, well, if you have a relationship, I'm assuming a vendor asked that. If a vendor has a relationship with a broker and can access the roster information, I would presume the smart vendor would ask the broker's permission to mail to them.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. So question, can transaction coordinators and assistants use Upstream? If the broker authorizes, they absolutely may. How about upload of photos via API?
Today, no, but we do have that on our product roadmap.
Can brokers create a connection between their back office system to push data to the MLS via Upstream? Yes, but you may as well originate it in Upstream and push it to the back office, would be my recommendation. Yep. Questions regarding MLS data. We're now syncing MLS feeds every 60 seconds to 5 minutes. We're pushing for every 60 seconds to be a competitive advantage for our firms. What is the latency on Upstream? It's an API, so it's as close to real time as you can get, right, Alex?
Yep.
Here's a question from an MLS executive that said, I thought the broker feed was just their data. An IDX is the entire MLS. And Rosemary, you are correct.
That is correct. The feed that I get from an MLS for a broker and a broker direct feed is just that broker's data. If I have 20 brokers in that MLS, I get 20 brokerages worth of data, but not the whole feed.
So the next question is related to GDPR compliance and privacy proof. I can tell you that you want to just talk about security a little bit. GDPR is like Upstream doesn't share a broker's data or personal information with any third party. The broker does that. The broker turns it on. We don't turn anything on. But you want to talk a little bit about security and the security that you put on the system, because it's pretty awesome.
Well, I mean, we were focused on making sure that, again, we wanted to enable the broker to trust and work the best way possible for them. So logging on the system is only allowed by the broker. The broker is the one who who tells the accounts, which agents can log on, which ones can't, which ones are need to access data, which ones don't. I mean, there's a good use case where even the broker itself can say, no, our data within our MLS looks great, it's clean, we just want to manage distribution, so we're going to set it and forget it. And the only person who needs to log on and do it is this transaction coordinator in the back office, and they only set up one ID. The system itself, the platform is secure. We do all your typical encryption that you would do on any website. The data, again, is not accessible by anybody that the broker didn't say, including Upstream. Like I can't download the data, I can't pull it, I can't anything, right? I don't even have a production login ID to be honest, as CEO of the company, which is smart. I mean, why would you give the CEO the production login? That's just crazy, right?
Well, and everybody kind of says, well, he never shows us the live system. Well, it's because you're not allowed to mess with the live data.
That's right. And the broker has not entitled me to see it, right?
Yeah, so the next question is kind of interesting and I think leading in a way, but it says, how does Upstream enforce the MLS rules?
Well, so it depends on which rules we're talking about. If you're talking about compliance, when we mirror all the rules in Upstream for the MLS, and we'll do it for every MLS in a direct input market. So we're entering in, it's going into the MLS, and then we're cleaning it up and doing all the compliance checks in flight. On our broker direct feed, we're getting a compliant listing from the MLS. They've already done it. The agent cannot change any of the data that comes from the MLS. They can only add fields, and they can only upload photos and increase photos. That's the only things in broker direct feed that they can do. And then of course they can distribute, because again, it is their listing. I mean,
yeah, and I would contribute to that, Upstream is not a policy maker or enforcer at all. That if a broker is a member of an MLS and that MLS has particular rules, like say for coming soon listings, that's between the broker and the MLS, not Upstream. The broker wants to put data in and do whatever they want with it. That's, we're not Upstream's not an enforcement agency, right?
No. Like I said, Google Drive, I use that analogy all the time. It's like we are the tool that gives them that, we enable them, but Google itself doesn't do anything with the data in the folders.
Next question, and this is a tricky one. You have to answer carefully.
Okay.
It says, is a broker required to put all listings in Upstream, or can they hold some back? So there, I just think you need to discuss the difference between a DI requirement for all listings and a BDF requirement for all listings.
Yeah, so the broker direct feed, we're just getting that broker's listings from the MLS. So they're living in the universe. Again, the agreement is between the broker and the vendor and the MLS. So the MLS, if they have requirements that you have to put the listing in 48 hours after it becomes active, you have to do that. I mean, all those contractual obligations are intact, right? And a direct input, again, you still have to live by all those contractual terms. I've entered the data into Upstream. I can send it to vendors. If my agreement says that I have to put it in the MLS in 48 hours, then by God, it's going to be 48 hours. And one of the things we're working with MLSs is like for them to have some sort of insight into sort of that reporting. We haven't totally locked it down yet, but it's one of the things we want to, as partners with the MLSs, we want to make sure the MLSs live, that everybody's living to the letter of their agreements. Again, we don't enforce it, we don't create it, we do whatever, but we can certainly give people some more insight and visibility than they've ever had. Now, we are creating, and one of the things that's enabled in Upstream that doesn't exist in a lot of places is this pre-active status, where you can distribute information about a listing before it goes active. Maybe you want to do a listing presentation. Maybe you want to create a flyer to show that seller to get them to sign the contract. Again, they have the ability to do that. It's not technically a contract yet. The minute they sign with that agent, then of course everything falls into place that it would be today. I mean, again, all of the agreements and things that you sign up as a broker in order to operate your agreements with your MLS, your agreement with your brokers, all that stays intact. Nothing gets updated, changed, or edited, or supplanted.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Alex, that there's a lot of brokers who have systems for making life easier for brokers before a listing becomes active. So we have a lot of brokerage clients who have a system for ordering photographers, and it's like a jump ball. What photographer is available that can do the following property? Yep. Or they want to order sign service to get the guy to go out and pound the sign in the yard, or et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of things that brokers do before a listing is entered into the MLS that are part of their business process. Yep. They might even be opening an account in their accounting, in their they may open an account for that agent for that listing, so they can start to make charges against it for pre-marketing materials that might be doing or whatever. So all those things are capable within the data management systems of Upstream if the application provider wants to serve that up. Will Upstream provide services like SSO for brokerages?
So right now we're doing, yes, we'll do that. These are going to be custom one-offs because clearly brokerages have their own. We are already providing this when we're doing this with some with MLSs. So we have certain MLSs that have, especially like a direct input, where you can go in and RMLS is a good example. When you log in to RMLS and you're looking at your listings and you happen to be an Upstream customer, the minute you try to go to edit, it sends it to Upstream and logs in automatically for them, and we can do vice versa. These are the kind of things we're working with. For broker backend systems, again, it depends. Is your backend system, like a off-the-shelf purchased back office, lone wolf kind of thing, or is it something you guys built in-house? But yes, we will. But I have to sort of temper the amount of custom work, just because there's a lot of brokers in line to get on this thing.
Okay. Does a Keller Williams version? This is, how does a Keller Williams broker who is a member of Bright MLS become a member of Upstream? Just contact Alex, I think.
That's it. That's exactly right.
As a vendor, does that property
on the website on upstreamre.com, there's a sign up, and if you're a broker, just go in and fill the form out, and we're lock and load.
There's another question about, and this is from an IDX vendor. So the question is saying, can I display the Upstream higher quality, deeper data for my broker client in an IDX environment instead of the IDX listing that comes from their MLS?
So I would say the short answer is probably no. And again, remember, IDX has compliance rules for you to be able to leverage that data. Now, if you actually read through the compliance documents, and I've actually read through hundreds and hundreds of these things, especially back in my days at Roost, most of those things have to do with the listing being commingled with data, commingled with IDX data, and or the URL for however that's being displayed has to be sort of its own sort of universe, if you will. It has to be different than what's coming to the IDX data. I mean, obviously, every one of these agreements, they've been standardized, but there are nuances by MLS. But you don't really want to commingle. I mean, and again, you might be able to find a way that is compliant with the local MLS that you're working with. But I'd say, as a general rule, good best practices. And this was the example I had with the website provider who was using IDX data to create. This is for a company's brokerage's intranet, right? They're using IDX data for the search and for the search results. When they get to the property detail page, if it's a non-brokerage listing, it looks standard IDX. It's all buttoned up the way it's supposed to be. And when they click on, but when on their website, they might say, these are our premier listings. And when you click that, it's actually shooting off like it's almost what I would consider a single property website, right? It's just going over, it's just probably a different URL, et cetera, where they're using the Upstream data with all the high-res photos, et cetera, for their own listings. Commingling it in a regular search result, so that is very, very dangerous, and take that,
I would check with your MLS.
You're treading water on that one. I would never advise that.
Yeah, I would tell you to check with your MLS because you're only enhancing your listing. I don't think the MLS will care what you do with it as long as it's not illegal. All right, the next question is also a commingle question. So the broker control with search port. I'm sorry. Did you say that we cannot commingle brokers' data with one product without permission from the broker? The answer to that question is we will provide you, or every broker who authorizes data to go to you as a vendor will authorize that data, and Upstream will send it. What you do with it is between you and the broker.
Exactly right.
So the broker has control which search portal it sends listings to. Does the broker control what search portals it sends listings to?
Well, if the search portal is integrated with Upstream, yes. If the search portal is not integrated with Upstream, you'll probably have to do it the way you're doing it today.
Can Upstream send data to more than one MLS on behalf of a broker?
Absolutely. In fact, if 10% of all listings in the country go into more than one MLS at a time, Upstream will configure for both MLSs. The agent only enters the listing once, and it will send it to both MLSs as that MLS in the format that the MLS wants to receive it.
We're the next question is a statement first and then a question. So we're implementing applications on MS Dynamic 365, now a part of our existing ERP system. Do you have apps in the store available, or do we need to apply APIs for connecting software applications?
So we are not an app store. What we're doing is creating vendors. We're allowing vendors to integrate with us to tell us what data you want. Once you're integrated once as a vendor, any single broker that wants to sign on with you, they just click and you get it. I mean, there's no multiple integrations. So, but we haven't created an app store. We're not really looking at it to do that just yet. I mean, maybe that sounds like an interesting idea long term, but for right now, we're saying everybody's integrated. Here's the list. Pick who you want to use. If you have a vendor you want to integrate, let us know. We'll make contact. We'll tell them that you want it, and we'll work with them to get integrated. So I guess in some way it looks like an app store. But again, because it's a relationship between the broker and the recipient, it's not, again, you have to have a broker have an agreement with you. So great, InPrev's for Just Listed Postcards integrated. Hooray! Every vendor who wants to use InPrev Just Listed Postcards can use them, and InPrev can get their data instantaneously. The missing link, there still needs to be a contract between InPrev and the broker.
Gotcha.
Right?
So today, Upstream only receives data input to the system via MLSs. Would Upstream allow another program to send data to Upstream?
Depends on what it is. If it's non-listing related or MLS related data, I'm certainly open to that. I mean, again, we are not trying to break anything, and so when we're talking about broker direct feed and we get the data from the MLS, that's pure and clean as a driven snow, and we're going to keep it that way. Now, like again, if the vendor has, I don't know, like if I'm working with INREX to get drive times or crazy things like that, that's a separate database. It's not the part of it, right? Or the brokers are adding fields that because they have title and things like that, then that's fine too. And entitled recipients can get that data from the broker. But again, this is a broker management tool for brokers to basically have more control, more power, more efficiencies with their own stuff. We as Upstream are not building derivative works. We are not combining data. We are not, this is like an open platform for the brokers to manage their data.
So does the next question, does Upstream allow any vendor or product that the broker selects?
Well, I mean, as long as the vendor is supposed to, it would get listing data or roster information. I mean, you don't even have to need listings. Maybe it's just roster information. Maybe it's a recruiting tool, right? They can totally integrate with that, and that's fine. And they'll only call the API for roster information or record firm information, etc. So any vendor, I mean, it's just like, as long as you need the data that we provide. I mean, I'm not going to provide things that, we're not a content management system, so I'm not putting everybody's prospects in there and you having access to that. I mean, maybe someday that'll be a future, but for right now, if it's listing data, firm record data, employee data, agent data, even vendor information, we will make that available if the broker asks for it. And the broker says integrate the vendor's integrated. We tell them we configured exactly as the vendor want. The broker decides what data they get active, get closed, get whatever, and sells history, gets photos, doesn't get photos. The broker decides that. So that's really between the broker and the vendor.
This is
always between the broker and vendor.
So this is a question that just I think you need to state this more clearly. But when I'm an agent and I'm just going to answer the question. So can agents alter another agent's listing in Upstream? And the answer is no. So if you're an agent that has access to Upstream, you can manage your own listings. If you're part of a team, that team may or may not allow you to edit listings. If you're part of an office, that office may or may not allow you to edit listings. And if you're part of a company, that company may or may not allow you to edit listings. But you only edit your own.
Yeah, so and to be clear, if the broker is the center of the universe in this platform, they determine how it works. Out of the box, it's exactly what Victor said, right? When you log in, you're only allowed to see the list. You only see the listings that are yours as an agent. Now, again, if that broker said, hey, we got all these people out in the field and all this kind of good stuff, and I have Sally up front who does all the entry. Everybody just fills out their sheets, right? And they give it to Sally up front. And Sally does the data entry. Then he enables Sally to see across the entire organization, and she can do that. So the hierarchy still starts with the broker needs to entitle the agent or the staff or the photographer and tells them what they can and cannot do.
Perfect. Who owns the copyright on Upstream data?
Depends. So in broker direct feed, a lot of the MLSs are already doing that copyright submission. And direct input, one of the things that we are offering is submission of the compilation to the Copyright Office as part of, you submit your listing, you enter it in, you put it in and go. A lot of the reason why we would do that, and that's so the broker would, clearly. One of the reasons why we do that is, again, we have these extra fields, right? So even on photos, they have their regular captions. There's also long captions and longer things that don't go to the MLS that they might be using for other purposes, and that compilation is one whole thing, right? So what we are putting in place is the ability for the broker to say, yes, and when I hit save or when I put it in whatever status, submit automatically to the copyright on the brokerage's behalf.
Thank you. Does Upstream data include public record data for use by vendors?
So no.
Can I authorize Bright MLS to upload my listings to Upstream?
Yes.
How long does it take to add a listing on Upstream?
I guess it's how fast you can type. I've looked. There's a blog post that we have on the Upstream website that actually talks about the testing that we did in the field when we first started launching. The general sentiment is that it's faster, but I guess which MLS are you in? Some interfaces might be equally fast. How fast do you type? Whatever. Like I said, we show side-by-side data for public record for them to make it easy. Uploads are easy. Drag and drops easy. We try to configure the data. We group the data in ways that would make logical sense. Area, location, green features, tax information, etc. We do make it very clear as you're entering exactly what fields still need to be filled out and what percentage you are complete before you can put in the active. So that might, in some instances, that might make it easier to figure out, like, okay, I still got these 3 fields I got to go, and here they are, and they're just presented to me like, here are your open fields. But again, you're comparing yourself to, is it faster? Well, again, against whom, right? Yeah. There's lots of different systems out there.
You guys did a nice job, I can tell you that. For brokerages with multiple MLSs, is the data input form further customized for the fields that might be different from MLS to MLS?
If in direct input, absolutely. So if I'm in 2 MLSs and that a field looks different in both MLSs, and I'm making this up. I'm totally making this up. Let's call it swimming pool, right? In the old days, I remember swimming pool wasn't really standardized. It might be a drop down in MLS. It might be a type in, like type doughboy. It might be a yes no field, right? What we will do is when we configure it, the agent just puts in what the RESO version of what it is. If we and we will try to translate it to what the MLS expects. So remember, it was a yes no. Well, you put anything, I guess it's yes, right? And we'll send it to the MLS the way they expect it. Now, if you can't reconcile it, we will actually split. We'll pop up like a split that says, for MLS1 pick, for MLS2 pick, and make it compliant. And that's such a rare use case that I can't translate or figure out what the intent is.
Well, an example is like in Atlanta, they have 2 MLSs, and one of them has 3 statuses, like active, pending, sold. The other one has like 5.
Yep.
And so in that environment, you pick the one that's appropriate for each MLS. Good answer. Do brokers using Upstream anticipate they will charge vendors for access to their data a per listing fee? I don't think so, because I don't know why the broker would charge the vendor when the vendor is charging the broker.
Right. It's circular, right?
Yeah. Hey,
Right.
I'm going to make
For
you
the
pay
services,
$1
right?
for my data. All right, well, my product is $3 now.
Right. I can't
Yeah,
I can't speak
but
for every broker in the world and what their futures hold, but I can tell you that's never come up a single time in 2 years.
okay. So we talked a lot about watermarks today,
Yeah.
and can you talk about Upstream's ability to watermark or put an incandescent watermark on photos and things like that, and data seeding and tagging and stuff
Yeah,
like
so
that?
I look at it more like seeding the data and not seeding like old school where you just add an extra record kind of thing. We actually have the ability on, especially on photos, to trace. So 123 Main Street is a listing. Photo 0 is the headshot, right? The photo 0 is sent to 4 different vendors for 4 different products. Each vendor gets that photo just slightly. You can't comprehend, see it, and like there's no visual way of looking at it, but we do. I'm just going to put in air quotes, tag each photo differently per vendor, so that if 2 years from now that photo shows up somewhere it's not supposed to, we can actually look at it and say, oh, it went from vendor 2. That's
Awesome.
how they got it.
Thank you.
Now, we're not trying to be we're not policing it at all. I'm just enabling the broker to figure it out. Anything else?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. No, I'm reading them because I have to make sure I understand the question before I ask it. And some of them are long.
Yeah.
For
And
non-direct
I appreciate
MLS.
all the attendees are on. Like the guys who are staying on and listening. I appreciate
I know,
it. You're in the
yeah.
background during lunch, but like great. I love answering these questions.
Thank you for staying. Yeah, for non-direct MLS relationships. So this is a BDF market.
Okay.
How often is the data updated in Upstream, specifically photos?
Well, we are pulling the data from the MLS as fast as the MLS will allow us. I mentioned this earlier that some MLSs let us pull pretty much continuously, it feels like, and some MLSs say, nope, you can only pull every 15 minutes. I can only pull it as fast as the MLS will allow. Now, if the agent is updating the photos and managing it themselves, it's instantaneously available. And as a vendor, you just pull as fast as you want. Like we don't really tell vendors like, oh, don't pull. You know, we haven't yet told vendors like it should be no more frequent than 2 minutes or something like that. But if they, let's just say you do it every 2 minutes and you just look for changes. But again, I still have to live by exactly the way the MLS is allowing us. And they're not doing anything different than they would with any vendor. So any vendor who's pulling feeds from the MLS, and if the MLS has a 15-minute limit, I'm probably living in the 15-minute limit world. I mean, they're not making special conditions for us.
Yeah, normally the way that happens, and we're talking about RETS, not API. So with RETS, normally what happens is technology developers or application developers will query a RETS database, and the minute it completes its task, you start again, and you start again, and you start again. There are some MLSs that will put a restriction and say you can only hit the server 25 times a day. Normally, what I've found with applications like Upstream is that if the brokerage goes to their MLS and says, hey, I really appreciate you setting that limit at 25 times per day for everyone, but can you make an exception for your brokerages? And we've always seen MLSs make those exceptions. They treat their brokers who are their participants in their MLS, and often, and sometimes the owners, a little differently than they treat third-party vendors who probably don't need that data as quickly. So
right.
I think MLSs are reasonable. If you talk to your MLS, you can get it as fast.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you go to Web API, then it's almost liquid.
Yeah.
Is the roster data available to vendors so they can determine who is a member of which brokerage and whether the member is still an active licensee?
Yes, absolutely. That's the point. So Isaac, while you're looking at the next question, I actually have this dream, and we're going to build towards this. I mean, it's kind of the skating where the puck's going, where vendors now have relationships with brokers, and we can sort of create this like pseudo automation across the entire brokerage process, so that vendors can look at what's being stored in Upstream, and especially as we extend the different types of data, where I can look for status changes, I can look for roster changes, I can look whatever, and if an agent comes on, I know I'm supposed to provision a new CRM. Just do it, right? Just have that in process built in the system so that you're servicing that broker better. I know that if there's a price change, and I pull and I see a price change, I know I'm supposed to update XYZ marketing, right? And as those kind of things, especially like for print marketing, right? And so like you make the agreement with the vendor, and the brokerage are working together hand in hand, and we have this sort of event data that's always pervasive and available, and sometimes maybe even anonymous depending on what the scenario is, but a vendor goes, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do now. Oh, I know what I'm supposed to do now. Oh, I'm not supposed to do that. Versus right now, and a good example, oh great, I have this CMA product, we bought it for the whole brokerage, we're paying X dollars per seat. I've got like 20 people over the last 2 years who have left that I forgot to turn them off, and I'm paying those licenses. Right, those kind of things that we want to enable the broker and enable that partnership. And so my dream is that we're building an ecosystem where the brokerage and the vendors are tighter coupled, tighter working together, and it just acts as this sort of event hub for them.
So we have a vendor who's asking a question. When and how do you plan on monetizing this?
So we're already, well, I mean, we are technically already planned and doing it. We're not collecting, so we charge the broker. There's a scaled pricing for brokerages based on the size of their company. It's tiered, so we give sort of like little volume discounts as you get bigger and bigger and bigger. The brokerage pays a flat fee per month based on their size. So if they're 0 to 25 agents, they pay like a flat fee of $50 a month. And no matter how many vendors, no matter no matter how many times they use it, no matter how much data they store, it's flat fee, right? And then again, like I said, it scales up based on whether you're 25 to 50, 50 to 100, and that kind of stuff, all the way into the tens of thousands, right? So we have the Hannahs with 7,000 agents. Well, they have a very different price point, but for the broker, we say it's a flat monthly fee, so it's very predictable for you. You know what it's going to be. And you pay for in the markets that you're in, and you're live. When you have an office with 20 people in it and they're live, you're paying that for the full office, not one agent. And we start billing in October.
Okay, this next question I don't think you can answer, but maybe you could talk about they want to know who the brokers are who've signed up for Upstream and who the franchises are. Maybe you could just talk about the types of brokers, because I don't think you have permission to give all their names.
Right. Yeah, so there's a little bit of confidentiality there. That's
how many people, I mean, how many agents though? How many agents are there represented in the brokers who've signed up for Upstream?
So the brokerages and networks, so Berkshire Hathaway, something like that, or Keller Williams. If you look by my board of directors, you'd see a pretty big, broad sweep. I mean, those guys alone have hundreds of thousands of people under their, say, sphere, if you will, right? Okay. Now, literally, and I mentioned this earlier already, we already have brokerages who have signed on and committed that when we're live in my market, and it's past October, we will pay the price that that's in their contract. We have enough of those that constitute over 250,000 people, agents, and we're just growing. We're signing up new ones every single day. So it's a long list. Now, I mean, the reality is, there's the big ones, and then it drops. If you look through any Real Trends list or anything like that, and you'll notice that after about 50 people or 50 brokerages, it plummets, because the average, 80% of brokerages across the country have less than 50 people in them. 80%. In fact, it's skewed really towards less than 25. So to give you a list would be it's a very, very long list. But
no, that's fine. So, I mean, I think you answered the question.
But I have pretty much representation from almost basically every brand.
And this is just a clarifying question. When I'm adding listing, can I add a document, like a disclosure?
Yes.
Does Upstream have a sandbox for test API access?
I just was demonstrating it, yes. In fact, for vendors, when you integrate, that's the expectation we should set. We'll send you API credentials. We'll send you all the documentation. And when you're setting up, you'll be setting up in the sandbox. And then once you go live and your broker is live, we just switch the DNS on it. But the reality is you'll set up. So when you first integrate and you first look, you're going to see sandbox data in it.
This is just this is a statement, not a question, but it says, thank you very much for the work that you did and contributing to RESO for the Web API version 1.1, which is ready for CRUD. And the statement is that the web API with update is available, but it's up to the MLSs to adopt it.
Right.
So not a question there, but more of a praise ye, praise ye.
I tell you what, man, I've been so happy and you know, and just fundamentally grateful for how well the RESO organization has been to work with us and to allow us to help them and them helping us and giving us direction and stuff. And they've been fantastic. And I'm very happy to see the API make the advancements that it has. To your point, you know, MLSs will have to ultimately they'll be mandated to comply or whatever. You know, I'm not sure, certify, I guess is the word. But you know, we all have different schedules. So yes, as an MLS does this, and as an MLS moves towards, you know, sort of adopting that standard and using it as a standard way to have data come in and out through our web API, we're all over it. I mean, we'll be like sitting there waiting in line, fogging up the windows.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of vendors don't understand MLSs, but I can tell you when they were constructed, they were intended to be like one-way streets where you put the data in and then the data is managed. The data is actually transported to a distribution server, and that's the way data goes out of it. And when markets started to introduce the concept of data share, the Real Estate Standards Organization with the MLS community created a different standard called Update. And it allows for, you know, data to flow from MLS system to MLS system. It also allows applications. Some of you may be in markets that have Instanet where you can start a listing off of your listing form that you create in Instanet. Or some of you may be in markets where there are mobile apps where you can like change a price on your mobile app and it goes and tells the MLS that there's a new price for that property. So those are very early on examples of how MLSs are beginning to use two-way data, you know, data going in and out, which is required for Upstream. I mean, Upstream wants to be able to put data into the MLS, and it's happened for years. I mean, Bridge Interactive, Zillow's product, has been putting data into both Georgia MLS and FMLS for many years. Patterson Schwartz in Delaware has never entered listings into the MLS. They've provided their MLS with the data feed forever, and Ebby in Netris for many years, up until I think recently when a new MLS system was put in, always put data into their MLS. So the Upstream concept of putting data into the MLS or databases sharing data of this level and quality is not new at all. It's happening, and thanks to RESO and Daryl and everybody who worked on creating a standard so that we can always, the goal here is to get everybody to do it the same way. It's when MLSs want to do it a different way and not follow data standards that it becomes really tricky, because you start mapping data and compliance becomes an issue and some data doesn't sort properly. Anyway, I'll just move on. Sorry for soapboxing. Where can we find a list of MLSs?
That I can provide. Give me a little bit of time, and when I said sub 1 week, and I'll have the MLSs that are on board posted on the Upstream website.
Awesome. There's a request that you hurry up and get Hawaii done, because the 3 MLSs in Hawaii are very painful to this person.
Awesome. Let's sponsor a trip. I need a road trip to Hawaii. That sounds great.
Yeah. That one I don't understand. How do you make money? We don't.
Well, like I said, so we charge the brokers pay us a per month flat fee for access, unlimited whatever. That's the fundamental. Now, in our operating agreement, to be clear, we are not allowed to make a profit. So once we hit sort of, you know, fiscal saturation, if you will, once I hit break even, I'll start evaluating rebates back to the brokers.
Okay. Will there be any duplication in Upstream?
So that's a generic term. I'm going to assume they mean.
I think no's the answer.
From a listing standpoint. So if a listing is entered into 2 MLSs, like I said, 10% of listings across the country get entered into more than 1 MLS, and it's in both, and both are broker direct feeds, we'll see both of those listings. Now, we're building tools for the agent to see the duplication. So they know we're getting 2 different feeds from 2 different MLSs for the exact same listing, and they want to enhance the photos. they can determine, they can sort of bind them together. It's the same issue we have with, agents who are in multiple locations, like the snowboard example I used earlier, and that we're building all the tools to make it super easy for a broker and agent to manage all of their listings, to have it clean, to not, there may, in the real world, there are duplicate instances, right? That in that use case, they're in 2 different MLSs. That is a duplicate of 123 Main Street. But that doesn't mean visually when they're managing the data that they need to see it that way. They might just see one listing with the count of MLSs that they're in, right? And we're just basically hiding it for the agent, right?
Somebody just wants the bit.ly link again. Again, it's bit. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I'm looking at
It's just Upstream partner, one word.
Okay. Can you include agent headshots? I think we answered that question as yes. The short link doesn't seem to work for sign up. You want to just make sure that works real quick?
I'm going to do it right
If
now.
not, we'll include the link. But more sign up form, bit.ly doesn't work.
I just clicked in. Here it is.
Got it. My fault. Okay.
All right.
A lot of questions about Bright MLS being integrated.
Love it. Those guys are awesome.
So I'm not going to say anything about that. Sorry. Some of these are questions that shouldn't be asked. Does Upstream allow you to tag each photo, like image number 1 equals kitchen, image number 2 equals living room? I think we showed that on the screen, but we'll just absolutely. And you can put further description as well. You can even retain your photographer attribution if you want.
This is true. Let's see if
somebody is confirming that North Star MLS will not be available through Upstream's API for 2 to 3 months. I don't think you can talk to that, but I did want you to know about it.
Yeah. So North Star is in queue right now for development. They're part of that 5 to 6 MLSs per month. They're in the next tranche.
So somebody's asking if Upstream is going to support two-way sync on roster. So much in the same way that if I make a change to somebody's name on my phone, it updates my CRM. And if I change their phone number in my CRM, it updates my phone. Will we do two-way roster sync with the broker's like broker website vendor or something like that?
So today we do not, but I am totally open to that, and that is not an unreasonable thing for brokers. I serve at the pleasure of the brokerages. If the brokers want that, and we are forming now that we're live. We've had tech work groups and agreement work groups, and we have an MLS, steering committee kind of stuff. But what we'll be doing now that we're live, is as customers are actually on board and using the platform, we're going to create sort of a product steering committee. So that they can help us prioritize all the inbound requests, and we get a lot. And if that makes sense, I'll build whatever the brokers tell me to build. But yeah, that totally makes sense especially for roster stuff.
Cool. Sorry, I just sent you, and somebody wants you to contact them. They put it in the questions dialog box, so I emailed that to you. We're almost at the end.
When you get a chance, Victor, just dump all, because you can export all the questions, just export them the whole thing and send them to me. And I'll look for patterns, and if there's things I need to write, like blog posts related to it, I'll totally will.
Okay. Does Upstream work with RESO, or is that totally different?
I think we answered that, but so we work with RESO as a partnership. Like we are totally behind pushing the RESO standard across the board. Anything that we can do to help, we would. If we discover data that when we're working with brokers that aren't in the RESO data this year for whatever reason, we'll tell them, we're like, hey, here's a list of things that we've come across that, I don't know, brokers are entering them in, but because they're storing it themselves. Now, when it comes to the RESO standard, absolutely. In fact, we're right in the middle of certifying. We want to live by the standard. Like I said, when the RESO web API is starting to get used, we're going to, like I said, well, I'm going to fog up the windows on every MLS. Let's go, and work with them. So the question is a little vague, and I guess the question is like, am I actually working with them? Yeah, we're actually working with them, and they're awesome.
This is a question. Are there fields that how so this vendor needs the MLS IDs?
This
So
vendor,
a vendor needs MLS IDs so they can sort listings by broker and agent and stuff like that. I think you just have to confirm that the MLS ID is in the data feed that
Yes.
Upstream would provide to
absolutely.
the vendor. So
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely part of it. I mean, that's part of it, a standard feed for a listing.
Yep.
Again, you're only going to get the broker listing. So the brokerage you have.
yeah, if I read into this question, it's like, say a broker creates a listing and they send it to a vendor, and then the listing goes into the MLS and then the MLS ID is assigned in a DI market. How would you get that MLS ID?
Oh, well, we get it returned from, we get the MLS ID on injection.
Exactly. So
yeah, we get it back.
So
even in a DI market where the MLS ID, where the upstream is entered in Upstream. First, clearly Upstream has its own ID just as a primary key. But when we do the insert, we actually return the MLS ID and store that as well.
Yeah.
And for distribution purposes, we distribute the MLS ID. The Upstream ID makes no sense to anybody. It's useless to people.
Well, except for when you're matching and deduplicating.
Yeah, well, there's that.
All right. Well, and the last question is again a statement. Great job. And P.S. The bit.ly link is case sensitive.
It's case sensitive. Sorry. I just created it on the fly. Darn vendors.
No, you did an excellent job. Well, thank you so much. We have what looks like a 2-hour recording here, right. But we will process it and we'll get it out. And Alex, if you could just send your deck to our staff.
I did, and I sent a PDF version of it for you to send out. So send the PDF version out. Yeah.
Okay, and so it'll take us a while to process the video and upload it to YouTube. We'll probably send the email out tomorrow since it's waning towards the end of the day. Awesome. And thank you again. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. A lot of stuff.
Thanks for hosting. And again, anybody has questions, come on. Go ahead and send any questions you have that isn't a sign up to team@upstreamre.com, and one of us will get that distribution goes to a bunch of people. So I'll make sure you get responded to.
Cool. Well, good job and keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.